This is the Picard podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're talking about Star Trek Picard, Episode 7, Nepenthe. Welcome back, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. This is TV Podcast Industries. We're talking about the 7th episode of Star Trek Picard, Nepenthe, on episode 468 of TV Podcast Industries. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Jolan True, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. I am one of your other hosts, John.
And I have beamed back aboard for this podcast. It is I, Chris. I am back with the group. I am back with my number one and my number two.
Excellent.
And I'm not talking about my toilet.
He has come from the Borg Collective. We said you were on a business trip with the Borg Collective. Mm-hmm. He is finally back.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it does feel like I was with all the XBs, but it's different. XBs means something else in that term.
It possibly does. Can I Bagsy being number one, not number two, Chris?
Sure.
Excellent.
Sure.
Thank you.
John, you are my number two.
Hooray! I can't wait for that. As long as you've not had red velvet.
No, but I did have a lot of sweet corn.
Chili.
Oh dear. Well, with that, welcome back everybody to our discussion about Star Trek Picard. Great to have you back, Chris. Really hope you've been enjoying the last couple of episodes. We haven't been enjoying it as much without you, unfortunately, but we've been loving the episodes of the TV show. It's been really, really good. It's been building since episode 4 onwards as they were kind of setting up the show, setting up the characters, and then the last 3 episodes seem to have been building towards this mission. This seems like a little bit of a diversion episode in some ways, but really important to the show itself, you know. One of the things I was talking to John during the week, one of the things that I don't know whether I mentioned back at the beginning of this podcast, one of the things that stood out about Sir Patrick Stewart at the European premiere when he was on stage talking about the show and the executive producers, what they were talking about really was this is the first Star Trek show not named after a ship, it's named after a person. And there's a real reason for that, which is the show is the journey of Picard. It's going from one point where he is very different to the character that we knew from The Next Generation, moving on to a place where he is more like the character we used to know. And I think that's evident in this episode, particularly with some of the conversations that he has.
It's more about the journey of Picard, not the ship. Because
Exactly.
Star Trek isn't the name of a ship.
That's true, yes.
Or The Next Generation.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Okay, grand.
The first show since The Next Generation. Thanks for pointing that one out, John.
That's true, because Voyager is the spaceship that they travel on, Janeway, captains, and Deep Space Nine is the space station as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Discovery is the ship.
Exactly.
And and Star Trek Enterprise was about the Enterprise. So, yeah.
But what about Star Trek?
It was Star Trek The Next Generation was the title, not Star
the original
Trek
Star Trek.
Enterprise.
Star Trek Enterprise, starring Scott Bakula as Captain Archer, was the
Okay,
Enterprise.
yeah.
So the first Enterprise. Yes.
The first one.
Yes, exactly. So that was a point that they made. I think it's really important, particularly with one of the conversations that we're definitely going to talk about in the episode. It's about the guidance of Picard, or getting Picard back to where he wants to be as a person, I suppose. So that's why he's been a little bit different as the show has been progressing, and also his age and the amount of time that's been passed since The Next Generation. But I'm surprised it didn't highlight it because it was one of the most interesting things they talked about, I thought, at the European premiere. So.
We also do get the coolest Vulcan ever with Commander O in her shades. Yay! I think she used to take a acoustic guitar into school, I reckon.
Well, we may have a theory about why she's wearing the shades. We will talk about that later on as we get into the episode. Anyway, welcome back, everybody. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast over on tvpodcastindustries.com. We'd love to hear your feedback about the episodes that we've been talking about so far. You can leave a voicemail over on our website up to 90 seconds about your thoughts about any of the episodes so far, or you can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. And as of today, as we're recording, we have finished our rewatch of season 1 of Penny Dreadful. We've released all 8 episodes of that over exclusively on our Patreon feed at patreon.com/tvpodcastindustries. If you support us for any amount, you'll get access to all 8 of those episodes, and you'll get access to all the rest of the episodes that we're releasing over the next few weeks in the lead up to the launch of the sequel series, Penny Dreadful City of Angels. So if you want more of us, that's a great way to get much more of us.
Yes, if you like us beaming into your ears and our soft, dulcet tones, then of course, pick up your favourite podcast catcher, any Romulan or Federation supporting podcast player, and you can listen to us through our main feed or through Patreon for the Penny Dreadful rewatch that we're doing at the moment.
Yes, I've yet to join. It is not I who is joining you at the moment, because if I don't have such a beautiful Aussie accent as Ray, I wish I did, but no. But that man has filled my virtual seat in this podcast booth amazingly well. I will be back for future episodes. Yes. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're hoping actually to keep you spoiler free for the fourth season of Penny Dreadful. So if you don't get the chance to rewatch, it might be interesting to have your opinion coming into the show without having rewatched it. But that could be interesting.
Well, every toy shop I walk past at the moment, I'm screaming because we're in season 2 now. Mm-hmm. We're covering that with the creepy as hell dolls. So yes, I'm glad Picard doesn't have any dolls aboard La Sirena.
Absolutely. And just a reminder for Star Trek Picard fans, one of the major characters in the show is played by Harry Treadaway. He plays Victor Frankenstein. So really cool to see him as a much younger actor. He's what, 6 years ago, wasn't it, when that was filmed? So a much younger character and a much younger actor in that show. Much less confident, I suppose, and it plays in really well with his character Frankenstein. So if you like him on Picard, definitely watch him on Penny Dreadful and join us for this podcast.
Yes, and of course, Brent Spiner will be on Penny Dreadful City of Angels in April. So, yes, a few little crossovers there that we didn't foresee when we were doing this.
Yeah, always good. Always good.
All series, all universes colliding.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
When we get vampires in Star Trek Picard Season 2, that's when we know everything has come together. Full circle.
Well, if you watched Star Trek Nemesis, the Remans in that show, the kind of Romulan associates, did look very vampiric in that movie. So they've already kind of done something like that. Anyway, let's get into the episode of Star Trek Picard. Not here to talk any more about Penny Dreadful. We're doing a lot of that over at Patreon. So let's get into this episode of Star Trek Picard. Star Trek Picard, Episode 7. Nepenthe was written by Samantha Humphrey and Michael Chabon. Samantha Humphrey was, as a working writer, she's worked on many episodes of shows like CSI New York, Alias, and SWAT. So this is the first episode for Star Trek Picard, though. First episode for Star Trek overall, actually. So really cool to have her on board.
Yeah, what a SWAT.
SWAT, yes. Yes, the TV show SWAT.
Now, we're asking Derek just to put in the who at this point. So it just goes, what a SWAT. Wow! Just like the beginning of CSI.
I was wondering what the heck the Who was, Chris. I have never watched an episode of CSI. It's another one of my claims to fame. That and only getting through 3 episodes of Breaking Bad. So, So I'm
Emmy award-winning TV series.
It's just passed me by. Not for myself. This episode was directed by Douglas Arniokoski. He's directed 3 episodes of Star Trek Discovery, 1 in Season 1, 2 in Season 2. Also directed the Star Trek The Brightest Star, the short trek episode. The one with Saru the Kelpian, before he joins Starfleet. Remember that one? Where it's himself and his sister on his original planet.
Yeah, vaguely, yeah.
So in one of the early short treks, but cool to have him on board here. So he has some visibility of the Star Trek universe. And there is a little reference in the episode to Star Trek Discovery as well. But John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with the synopsis for this episode?
Sure. Picard and Soji transport to the planet Nepenthe, home to some old and trusted friends. As the rest of the crew of La Sirena attempt to join them, Picard helps Soji make sense of her recently unlocked memories. Meanwhile, Hugh and Elnor are left on the Borg cube and must face an angry Narissa.
Excellent. Yes, they obviously didn't want to give away the special guest stars in this episode, so they had to write their synopsis around the fact that we have the wonderful Will Riker and the awesome Deanna Troi back in this episode. So they seem to want to avoid that, didn't they?
But we did know they were coming back.
Yeah.
So, as we got further into the series, I was like, they're going to show them at some point. And as soon as I saw the synopsis was some trusted friends, I was like, okay, this is this episode.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the question actually went out very late to Jonathan Frakes, who plays Will Riker. The question went out quite late to him to ask him to come onto the show. So they've been trying to hide it a little bit, but PR companies, marketing departments, have been putting out photographs of them for weeks showing that they're in this episode, but they had a sizable story and quite a cool central role in this episode, I think. We normally talk about all of our episodes of Star Trek Picard by picking our 3 favourite moments each and discussing through them. Our first favourite moment is our Prime Directive.
We must face the ramifications of the Prime Directive.
So, John, do you want to kick us off with your Prime Directive, your favourite moment from the episode?
Well, speaking of those old and trusted friends, my big moment is the trip down memory lane for this. Having Deanna and Will Riker here, for me, was just fantastic. Mm-hmm. It was a really, I might get a little sort of dewy eyes here, but it was really nostalgic. It was infused with warm emotions, and for me, it just made it utterly brilliant. It really captured the Next Generation and brought it into this time within, the Federation in the future in such a nice way. It looked back, but it was so important for this show and for the mission that Jean-Luc finds himself on. And I think in particular, because I know, you're taking Deanna really, but I want to pick Riker and Picard here. I just thought they were so good together. The chemistry came back immediately. You felt as though it was old friends coming back, because it is in reality, and that just translates even more with these great actors into something that felt absolutely as genuine as anything. So I absolutely loved these two together. Yeah. I have to say, before I kind of really get into my main point, I loved the fact that Will Riker was aboard what I am calling the USS Family Kitchen. I thought this was just a moment of genius where he's in the kitchen with his apron on. And as soon as he realizes that Jean-Luc is there, it's suddenly back to battle stations. It's kind of shields up, long range scanners active, cloak detectors active, all this kind of stuff. I just thought that was the best kitchen ever.
It was awesome.
I thought it was really, really cool that he was treating it just like the bridge of Enterprise. What a great little touch that was.
I love this idea that they're in this really idyllic place, it's surrounded by trees. This beautiful location where they filmed this is absolutely gorgeous. And it just shields up and you see the shields popping up in the background, it's completely kitted out for the former captain of a ship, so it's a very cool.
But that's it. I was expecting him to say red alert and for the oven to start sort of flashing red and you getting the noise, the classic red alert.
Well, they did have that reference, didn't they? When there was the pizza was burning, you do hear cancel red alert. It's just a burnt tomato.
Well, yeah, no, exactly. So, this was just really, really nicely done. But I think what was so much better as well was just Riker and Picard, and in particular I think Riker here, you can see he knows his captain. They've worked together. It really gave a sense of that longevity of the Next Generation. His analysis of the situation, that she is an android, they're on the run from the Romulans, it's her that she's after, what has she done? In a sense, another big insight into Picard, actually, or dare I say it, revisionist take, you could almost argue, on Picard, where he says classic Picard arrogance, because Jean-Luc is trying to shield Will and Deanna and Kestra, their daughter, from coming. He says he regrets it. So he's trying not to give anything away to them so that if the Romulans do come, they have nothing to tell them. And you understand that. But Riker's kind of like, you know who I am. We're friends. You can tell me. But he doesn't need to, because Riker can just analyze the hell out of that. And he gets it spot on. With regards to the situation, and just kind of indicating to Picard that, he's always been best when he's brought other people in to make the decisions. And this is another big element of this, as you were saying before. This is where Picard in a sense, it almost gets reset a little by visiting these old friends who can cut through the smoke and mirrors and the ego and everything that Picard has become within Starfleet and the Federation because of all his successes.
Yeah.
And they just cut to the heart of the matter.
Well, like the first thing that Picard says really to the two of them when he arrives is that he's in over his head, and that's a true trust between him and the friends that he's made. These aren't just people that served with him in the past. There's 16 years since they served together, or more actually, probably about 20 years since they served together. This is a time for him to say, I am here as a friend and I need help. And it's something that, the character, other people think that this character Picard wouldn't reach out for help, but he always did in the past. He's been trying to do this alone, and now he's going, actually, maybe I need to take a breath and trust in some of my friends. I love that the way that he describes it to Will is, I had a ship, I had a crew of sorts, they're all gone now. I had a plan, which turned out to be half a plan. It's like, please help me out here,
Yeah, it's just really nice. But I think you really get the sense that this comes from a place of immense friendship between the two and a great respect. And, I think that's slightly, that's what sets this apart from maybe the Admiral, telling Picard, no, you can't just have a Starfleet ship to go off on this mission that you've kind of cooked up. That's coming from a place of where she feels threatened by his knowledge of Starfleet, and his success, his standing.
Yeah.
Riker doesn't have that. And I thought this was a really nice way of saying the same thing, but I suppose ultimately with it coming from Riker, that it's nothing malicious. It's actually just him trying to tell Picard, come back to who you actually are, which is someone who brings other people in on decisions, gets all the information and then acts. And I just really, really, really enjoyed this, the two of these together. And I think them sat on the bench on the little jetty in the pond.
Yeah.
With that scenery.
Oh, that scene was amazing.
It was, wasn't it? It was just so nice and lovely. So that's my main point really, is this nostalgia infused, utterly brilliant sort of linking between the Next Generation and this new series Picard, and in particular I think through Riker and Deanna, as well as Kestra, but it really was so good, and all the nice little touches back to how Will Riker was on the bridge of Enterprise was just so good.
Absolutely. I love that moment when the two of them are sitting together on the bench at the end of the episode. I thought it was a lovely scene, but it also showed the frailty of Patrick Stewart, really, in side by side with Jonathan Frakes. And they're not that far in difference in age, but side by side with this very large man in Jonathan Frakes, who looks like he's about 6 or 7 inches taller than Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
But he has his hand on his shoulder throughout the conversation, and he kind of hugs him close towards the end, saying, I never thought you should have retired and should have given up your position. And there's a kind of frailty almost in Picard being able to take the respect from his friend, the caring from his friend, just for a moment, to kind of let himself be in the embrace of a friend telling him, I trust in you, I believe in you. And it's a lovely film scene. I thought it was really interesting, but it does make him look quite frail side by side with this other former captain from Starfleet. So, anything else about Riker, Chris?
No, for me, it was just that it's that friendship. So like, they're two friends who haven't seen each other for years, but they fall back into it. We all have those friends.
Absolutely.
It's like, okay, I haven't chatted to you for 6 months, but we're going to talk like we talked yesterday. So that falling into the number one or captain versus number one, but he's at the same time, Riker, as you said, he calls out the Picard arrogance. They've gone beyond captain and number one. There's that friendship, that bond where,
absolutely.
Remember, like at the beginning, it was probably more towards the films where, or towards the end of Next Generation, where Riker did call Picard out on things and disagreed with him openly and things like that. And it's good to see that. 2 quick things. One, if I'm wearing a black jacket and either of you are making pizza dough and come at me with big flowery hands and smack them on my back and cover me in flour, I'm gonna kill you. Just
dude.
putting that out there. Even if I haven't seen you for years, I'm like, give me a second to take the jacket off. Just give me, like, dude.
It comes from a place of love, Chris.
I know. It will also come from you paying for my dry cleaning.
There's no form of payment at all in this version of the world, Chris. Everybody's much more beyond the possessions that we have in our time.
What if we threw a bag of flour at you,
We definitely do that.
Let's see that.
followed by water and then eggs?
And then it all comes together.
Chris's rage all comes together in a lovely cake mix.
Excellent.
The big bit is for me is that Riker helps reset Picard, right? The question is, I don't get why Riker didn't go with Picard. I understand Troy, because the daughter's there.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that. I don't get why Riker didn't even offer, because at least he would go, I'll go with you, I'll help, we'll do this together.
Yeah.
Like, let me relive my glory day, not relive my glory days, but I'll be there one last hurrah, like the last Alamo.
See, I think he does offer that, Chris. He says that he is still in reserve to be on Starfleet, but it would need to be a very big reason to go out there again. And I don't think he feels this is big. I don't think he feels this is big enough.
But that's the Federation. He's on reserve. It's like being your reserve in the army. You're going to get called back up. This is one of my best friends, my confidant.
Mm-hmm.
He needs help. He's on the run. He's a life-threatening situation.
Yeah.
I'm in the military. I know what to do. Why don't I just put on my backpack, go with him for a while? That's it. And I get it. Maybe he'll come back later. Maybe they'll like reset and kind of like explain.
But that's the point, Chris. He's in the military, he's in the police, let's say, for example. This is a galactic police force, kind of. He's still working for them. He can't just go off on a whim and go against their wishes. Remember, Picard is retired from Starfleet, so he's not beholden to them telling him you can't have a spaceship. He's got himself his own spaceship, and now he's out roaming. Riker's still effectively working for them. Also, and I think it goes very well into my big moment from the episode, it's not just that the three of them are on this planet, and it's not just that Kestra will need protection if Riker goes off on a mission. It's also that they've lost their son. Thad died when they came to this planet, and it's affected all three of them in quite significant ways. And this is my major point, is the loss of Thad, Riker, Troy, a character we don't see on screen. We've never known that they had any children at all. We assumed that they got married and had kids and lived life happily ever after kind of thing. But the presence of this character and how well written this is within the scenes from the opening moment where you see Kestra arriving and she talks about the fact that she's dressed up because it's a game that her brother had, and you're expecting her to introduce you to the brother. Then you have the introduction of Deanna Troi, who's saying to Picard, you can stay in Thad's bedroom kind of thing. And you're going, oh, he must be off at college or something. Maybe that's what it is. And then the build of it, that effectively the whole reason they're on this planet is because Thad was dying of an illness, and the only place that could cure him possibly was this planet. Because they outlawed the synthetics, which could have possibly saved them if they'd investigated in this medical treatment for him. Because of that, this could have been the only place that saved him, but they got here too late. So these whole scenes are just tinged with the sadness of loss for all of these characters, and no one plays that better than Marina Sirtis here in this role as Deanna Troi, once again coming back after, again, 18 years since she played this role, you know. I think she's absolutely wonderful here. There's moments that I just had absolute tears in my eyes. There's a second at the dinner table where Soji references the fact that she now has a home planet and calls it the same thing that Thaddeus called the home planet that he wanted. And Marina Sirtis, you can see her heart breaking in her eyes as she looks down at the table. You know, the respect that's coming from Soji saying, I've understood the story of your child and I understood the loss that you've all had. That moment between the two of them is just so wonderfully played by Marina Sirtis, you know. Something that I also loved in the episode. Remember what this character was like on Next Generation. Now, you know, she got better over the movies and the character got better written as the seasons went on, but every time you saw her, she had to say, I feel something. I feel that you're very angry at this situation. You're going, yeah, because you just punched that guy over there. They don't mention once in this episode that she's an empath, that she has special powers that allow her to read other people. The only time they make reference to it is when Soji arrives and she says, I get nothing from her. But that could be just passed off as something else. They just don't really use her to go to Picard and say, I'm using my powers right now with you to work out that you're this. They play it off that she knows Picard really well, has known him for 30 odd years, and would know how he feels. But they don't have to play it off that there's this superpower in Star Trek that they need to explain effectively. Like they seem to have to do for 7 seasons of that show. She always had to have something to do, and it was usually, I have a feeling about the situation that anybody else could read. So I like how it was written for this episode. And I love how it was played by this actress. I think she was wonderful. Probably the best performance I've seen from her in any of the things I've seen her in.
Yeah. I had to explain to my partner that part with Soji.
Right.
That the empath part. Because she was like, what, why? Like, what does that mean? I'm like, well,
right.
Soji is a robot, so she doesn't have emotions. So, or she doesn't give off the emotions that an empath can feel. She goes, what's an empath? I'm like, okay, hold on. Yeah. Taking it back on Beta's head, where the empaths are come from. Yeah, so I do love Troy. The printer in my office is called Troy. It hangs above so I have a picture of Deanna Troy hanging above my head beside the printer.
Excellent.
Which is always great for nerds like us. The Thad Riker Troy bit, I felt like I had missed something. Yes, we knew they were married, but I thought maybe, did I miss something in like First Contact or something or maybe towards the end of the Next Generation, that there was they had a kid. I was like, did I forget they had a kid on the Enterprise? Because the photo you see of the baby and Picard, I was like, okay, that does look pretty fake, but I'm like, am I forgetting something? I think this will come on. I'll bring this point out more later on. One of my pieces of feedback on the series so far is that they're trying to elicit emotions on some of these characters, but they're doing it at such a breakneck speed that the actual emotional connection, the empathetic connection, is just not there. So I actually don't have it.
Right.
So,
and you didn't even feel in this episode, like I thought this episode was so perfectly balanced particularly with the story of a character we've never met, and how it was laid out. I think it gave enough to each of the characters that even though you may not know who they are, or even though you may not have seen them for 20 years, I thought the emotion really played through them all. You know, it's like a stage play, going to see a stage play. You don't know any of the characters walking in, and by the end of the play, you could be bawling your eyes out at some of the things that are going on. And I think that's what Deanna Troy particularly brought out in me throughout this episode. But maybe it's because I do have an emotional connection to those characters because I loved them as a kid, and I've seen the seasons many times as well. Maybe it's because I have a connection with the two of them, but she specifically stood out to me as being really good. I do also have to compliment the actress who played Kestra, their daughter. I think she was really good in those scenes as well. I thought she was quite adept at handling some of the emotions of having someone who's lost a brother at the young age that she is. I think she did a really good job on screen there as well.
Yeah, I thought Deanna was really good here. I loved, again, like Will, you know, she kind of knocks Picard a bit. You know, speaking about Soji, saying, you know, she's just had her own consciousness has been violated, which I thought was really sort of interesting way of putting it. And certainly as an empath, then, you know, it's a real insightful way of describing that consciousness has been violated.
Yeah.
What she's thought or thinks she has known, is no longer holds true. And there's a huge amount of readjustment happening to Soji in this episode. I also thought that conversation across the sort of the tomato patch in the garden between Soji and Deanna was really nice. I thought that was a great chat. I mean, I suppose just coming to your point there, Chris, it's kind of, you know, I suppose that's what we're finding out in this episode. Feeling sorry for Deanna and for Will came from just having known them through the Next Generation. And this was new information, developments that had happened, which we're kind of learning. So, I thought that was, it tinged a lot of the decision making of these two with a huge amount of melancholy. And I think that's part of the reason why Riker doesn't want to go with Picard, even though he's his best friend, is because with what's happened to them, his command ship is his kitchen, is their house, and his family, and that's where he's going to stay. And I think Picard understands that, but if they can, they will help in taking them in and feeding them and allowing them to rest.
Absolutely. And there is that moment as well. Like Deanna even says it, you can stay for as long as you want to. That's the offer that we have. You stay here. You can stay hidden. We'll feed you. We'll take care of you. You have a bed to sleep and a roof over your head. We'll take in your friends. No problem at all. But we're not going to leave here. We have our own mission now, which is taking care of our child and our family unit as well, I think that comes across really well. You're right though, John, that scene with Soji and Deanna is really good when Issa Briones, who plays Soji, when she turns around to Deanna and says to her, but the way you're being right now, the way you're being so kind and caring and loving, I don't trust a thing about that. It's you suddenly get that moment of realization of what Soji has gone through in the last episode, really, because you kind of have that thing, we saw Daj in the first episode and we've seen Soji over and over again in this relationship with Narek for the last 4 or 5 episodes. And you kind of think you know what's going on in her, but that's because you know that she's an android. You know from the first episode this character's an android, but she didn't know that until she first meets Kestra in this episode and goes, oh, you're an android like Data. And suddenly she's like, broken at that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, Soji says, I don't trust you, Kestra, and certainly not Picard. Because Soji's kind of saying, what I thought was real is no longer real anymore. I want to get back to real. And Deanna says real is not always better after saying about being through the reality of losing their son, Thad. So, and everything that all that pain, disruption that it caused within the family. So I thought it was a great conversation. And to be honest, I think Deanna Troi has been written in this episode so much better than she had been written certainly early on in The Next Generation. Again, it's a different context. They're not on a ship. It is a family unit. You can get the reasoning for it. It's a scientific vessel in The Next Generation, but they put her empathy to some really impactful sort of emotional punches in what she was doing. So I thought that was really, really good.
Absolutely. What's that moment where she goes, a ship's counselor's not supposed to say this, but you had that coming when Soji pushes Picard out of the way, so I really like that little moment between the two.
Yeah, and to me, this whole thing, just like with my point on Riker, just the nostalgia element to it, it was just nice having these people interacting,
Absolutely. That's kind of all the things I had to say about Troi. Anything else, Chris, or do you want to go on to your major point with the episode?
No. So I'd like to kind of move it forward a bit, or should I say flash forward. So my part is Jurati, Dr. Jurati, and her meeting with Commodore O. So we finally get the flashback to show where Commodore O where she meets Jurati, and we get to see what that was. And they, and Commodore O performs a Vulcan mind meld. Maybe, or so basically shows Jurati an image of what would happen if what we assume is the synthetics rise up.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not disputing that it's a mind melt, by the way. I'm just disputing Vulcan still.
Yes.
It is a mind melt, definitely.
Yeah. So my question becomes, what did we see there? Are we getting into time travel parts here? We've had time travel in Star Trek before.
Absolutely.
Especially in Discovery and things like that.
Absolutely, yeah. And lots of Star Trek. I think every show has had some form of time travel. Even the last episode of Next Generation was effectively a form of time travel, right? Yeah. So it's had it a lot, yeah.
And we've also had different universes.
Yes, we have.
Yes. What we see here, what I see, you see an image of Earth explode. Like, you see massive explosions on Earth.
Yeah.
And things like that. And
almost like an annihilation event or something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like literally the comet hitting Earth.
Yeah.
And what I'm starting to wonder is, so it's not just xenophobia or in terms of against synthetics. This is starting to get bigger, crazier. I was under the impression it was maybe something to do more because we had the whole Borg in there, that it was maybe the Borg and the synthetics rise up together, blah, blah, blah. That would be where they were going with this.
Right.
But this starts making me question is this a time, space, wibbly wobbly thing? Or is this a different version of the dark multiverse in that we've seen in Discovery, where they have that the Federation, or their version of the Federation, I can never remember the name right now, goes against all the humans go against all other species of aliens, and becomes, is this like Commodore O has come from that timeline or that universe and come across?
There you go. Yes, you're nailing very close to my theory here, and this is part of the reason that I think she's wearing the shades. Because I'm not I am not going to spoil anything about Discovery, because we don't cover Discovery. There's definitely many reasons to watch Discovery, but one of the things that is in there is a mention of the fact that characters from the Mirror Universe, which is what you're talking about, Chris, this kind of dark other universe, are sensitive to light. So it's possible that this character of Commodore O, wearing the sunglasses when she arrives up to Jurati, has been in another mirror universe, a universe where something like this may have happened, and she's transferring that knowledge to other people to convince them to go against the synthetics. It's just a theory. It's part of the question as to why she would be working with other characters within the Zhat Vash, the underground version of the Romulans. Why would a Vulcan be working with them, especially someone as high up in Starfleet? Why would she be working with them? Maybe she's from a mirror universe, so she doesn't have the same types of traits that a regular Vulcan that we've known in the past would have. There is the possibility that she is also a Romulan. We've never seen a Romulan do a mind meld before, and that's definitely a mind meld here, but it's still possible. We keep saying, as we talk about Star Trek Picard, that there's a very small amount that we know about Romulans. They were quite two-dimensional characters when created and when used in many other shows before. So some of the stuff that's coming in now could be just new information that we've never seen before. But those are two kind of theories that I have there, and I feel like there's a major reason for those sunglasses, and because they were used in Star Trek Discovery, I think it ties in with the current universe and knowledge that people have about those shows.
Well, if your theory is correct around the mirror universe, and obviously we know that they're sensitive to light, so if she is from this mirror universe, then that blows my theory out, which she is the coolest Commodore O in Starfleet. And she just happened to be like the Fonzie of like the Federation.
She goes up and hits the replicator and just goes, hey! And it just makes it copy.
So unfortunately, yes, but that whole theory of yours is interesting, because we do get Narissa right at the start when she is killing the XBs, and there's Hugh there. She says how many operatives have been working across the galaxy and the systems in order to try and get Soji and Dahj dead and to find their homeworld. So that talk of operatives could be around operatives coming from the mirror universe, the other dimension in a sense. So it could be to do with that. So that's maybe another theory, is that it seems weird that the Vulcans and Romulans would be working together, but in the mirror universe, we know that the equivalent to the Federation has been fairly, is aggressive and has very different ideals to the Federation in this universe. Yeah. And so they could actually be sort of doing something to try and repel the Federation, or it's just that in that world, the Federation Earth is something that has gone because
maybe.
The time travel.
Or they're traveling over from the mirror universe. I just think it's important to note because remember, we live in Europe, so we get to see these episodes on Amazon Prime. Star Trek Discovery was on Netflix when it came out over in Europe. But remember, these shows are both available on CBS All Access in the US. So that means you watch these episodes and you go, I want to watch some more Star Trek and I want to watch new Star Trek. So you pop over and you watch Discovery. So it would make a lot of sense for them to tie in the Mirror Universe and that travel over from the Mirror Universe because that was a central point for a number of characters within that show. So if you were watching those episodes last week, if you watched season 2 of that show and you're now watching episode 7 of this show, then suddenly you go, oh, this all ties in really well, you know? So it's just important to note that the actual channel that made Star Trek Discovery also made Picard. So they would be very silly if they didn't do something to tie into that show.
I just think that they'll get hit by a lot of critics if they pull the same university thing. In terms of multiverse, like different they'll be like, oh, you've done a very similar beat, if you will.
It's all connected, Chris.
It is true. It's true. It is true.
I think it's connecting the shows as opposed to saying that they're repeating the story because the story is massively different. But I think it does connect the two shows. And I think that's massively important for CBS All Access. Remember, they're trying to encourage people that were Star Trek fans to come on board. The biggest way to do that is to get Patrick Stewart on to do his own show. That's going to encourage lots of people that may not have come over for Discovery to subscribe to their channel. And what they want to do is go, do you want to know more story about what Star Trek is like in other parts of the universe and other pockets of the universe? We've got 2 seasons of this show over here on CBS All Access that you can now watch with your monthly subscription. I know that sounds very marketing-y. I know that sounds very manipulative, but sure, why wouldn't you not want to watch it if you're going to pay £7 a month to watch that channel? Go over and watch Star Trek Discovery. It'll fill in some more gaps for these characters.
True, but everyone should watch Star Trek Discovery anyway.
Definitely.
It is really, really good.
For no other reason than it's a great way to spend 2 seasons of a show. Yeah.
Also, just on one of your points is that we do get confirmation that the Chad Vash is real.
That's
Narissa does call out that she is Chad Vash, not Tal Shiar.
That's right. Yeah, we hear that for the first time in this episode, don't we? We'd heard the description about the fact that there is a Zhat Vash early on in the season, but we never heard anybody say that they were members of the Zhat Vash up until this episode. So, that is in there as well. I heard somebody call out that they had never seen or never heard Narissa's name spoken on screen. That was back in episode 2 when she meets Narek for the first time. He calls her Narissa. So that is in the show. So we do know that her name is Narissa, right? But I know the synopsis have been putting it in there as well, but it was almost directly after we heard her name as Lieutenant Commander, whatever it was, that we haven't heard that since, but we've heard Narissa definitely on screen.
Well, it's funny. I only knew the name because Chris mentioned it.
Really?
I can't remember it being said, but I'm sure it has been. I probably just missed it. But
it's the first time she visits Narek on the cube. He calls her Narissa. So yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So when we're first introduced to her, she's called something completely different when she's undercover.
Yeah,
and then he calls her Narissa.
Yeah.
He calls her something first and then says her name like in that monologue.
Yes.
But anyway, moving forward very quickly because I know we're going super long at the moment. Jurati as a whole, we see in the flashback where Jurati sees something. We see lots of very quick flashing imagery, things like that. There's obviously more as well because it's just if I came up and just dumped a load of info into your head and just go, oh my God, the world's going to end unless you do this. That's not going to convince you completely to go kill your lover. So there is obviously more to. There's obviously a discussion that happens, and I'm interested to see because I don't know if we'll see that or hear it, but definitely we need to know more because essentially it leads Jurati to A, basically kill her lover, B, put the whole of Picard and everyone in danger, not knowingly, but put them in danger, and not speak up about the tracker.
That's true, but I just wonder whether through the mind meld done by Commander O, that she can influence and impact Jurati's mind or emotional response. Because I did think that her response from that mind meld, it's pretty instantaneous. And I just thought that because there is that transfer of emotion, images from Commander O to Jurati, that it's imbued her with this response. So maybe she's more willing, she's more passive to taking up then the rest of that conversation. I suspect that happened between Commander O and Dr. Jurati, which we don't see here in this episode. We see her being given a pill, but effectively Dr. Jurati is kind of like, oh right, I'm on board immediately because of her emotional response. And I'm like, but is she fully in control of what she's doing? And that there has been some kind of persuasion through that mind meld on Dr. Jurati to act in the way that Commander O wants her to. And I think that a mind meld can potentially do that. It's certainly a very powerful thing in the Star Trek world.
Yeah.
It can have you sort of on a table going bonkers as well. I think I'm sure we've seen that sometime.
If you don't do it very well, it could break someone's mind.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So I really kind of think that Jurati as well is quite, she is someone that takes persuasion quite well, I think.
I agree with you, but I don't think it's anything to do with the mind controlling her. I genuinely think the images that have been supplied to her and all of the feelings and all of the combined information that's provided through the mind meld is what convinces her that if she doesn't do something, the world's going to end, is what I think is happening there. And I think the only further information we're going to get out of that, because all we got on the show was that moment and then Jurati throwing up, and then we saw the fact that she killed Bruce Maddox later on in the series, or earlier on in the series, whichever way around you want to say that. It's hard with flashbacks, isn't it? But I think all we're going to get is her explaining that to Rios or explaining that to Raffi in a later episode. I was shown this is what would happen, and this is what I had to take matters into my own hand, and then this is what the outcome was. So I think that's kind of, well, it's enough for me, I suppose. If all of that information was poured into my head, I'd probably do exactly the same, throw up on the ground just like Jurati did. And that is what's convinced her to do it. So we have the motivation, at least, of why she's gone on this mission. Let's get into our second points, because my second point is also about Jurati.
Implement the Omega Directive immediately.
Just one of the other big moments for Jurati is her breakdown, I suppose, with Raffi. So my moment is the misunderstanding of Dr. Jurati in the episode, because first it starts off with really Raffi completely misunderstanding the situation, thinking that her sleeping with Rios in the last episode, something's happened between the two of them, and she's just this little girl that's, feels a bit spurned by her new lover kind of thing. She starts feeding her full of cake and feeding her full of chocolate milk as if she's a child, and suddenly the realization crossing Raffi's head going, oh, hang on a second, Bruce Maddox, you were in love with him and you were in a relationship with him for years, or for a number of years, and he's dead. She doesn't know she's murdered him, obviously, but she knows that this is a lover that's dead. And I like that kind of moment between the two of them, their misunderstanding. But my misunderstanding in the episode was, I thought that continued. I thought that she went into this spiral and then ended off trying to kill herself. And that's totally my fault. It's not there on screen. When I watched it the second time, I was like, how did I get that at all? Rios is talking to her afterwards, after she's thrown up this velvet cake on the ground that looked really grossly like blood, as if her internal organs were melting out of her mouth, until she said it's red velvet cake. But we have that conversation between Rios and her, where Rios is identifying that he thinks they're being tracked because of this implant that he thinks is inside Raffi, because she's the only one that left the ship. And you have Jurati making this uranium hydride piece of equipment to stab herself in the neck, and she falls over and starts foaming at the mouth, effectively. And I had thought that this was all coming from a sense of guilt, effectively. The guilt, firstly, that she'd killed Bruce Maddox, and secondly, that the ship was being tracked because of her. But of course it's not. It's because she knows how to get rid of this out from her body. Hopefully she hasn't overdosed because of what she's trying to do, because she does get that warning. But she is a doctor, so what she's actually trying to do is just stop the tracker that's happening. And of course the tracker stops immediately afterwards. But I had thought she was killing herself. I thought that we had this really tragic story of the character that everybody thought was the innocent on the show, the Wesley Crusher, or like the character of Tilly from Star Trek Discovery, the one that everybody loves. I thought that's what she started out as at the beginning of the show, and then in episode 7 we had her committing suicide in the episode, But luckily the emergency medical hologram is there to go bloody hell and get her onto a bed as she goes into a coma. So hopefully we'll see her back.
How did he do that? Because can emergency holograms lift people? And
the
put them
emergency
in bed?
medical hologram is able to do whatever it needs to do to get the job done. What that could be, and we didn't see it on screen, but if they can't touch things, what they can do is say, transporter, transport that body onto that bed.
Okay,
so they can do that.
And then just wrap her in a lovely sheet and have her tucked in. And
But I believe they are hard light. Remember, we did see him treating Rios earlier on in the episode. So, I presume they could touch other beings because it would be a very, very useless light hologram that we would have if they weren't able to actually touch their patients. But I do love that moment of emergency medical hologram going bloody hell as he realizes this person who last he saw was murdering somebody. Remember? So will he reveal that to anybody else, or is that going to be now patient doctor privilege? Will he reveal that the last time he saw her, she was turning him off so that she could kill Bruce Maddox?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I certainly thought she was killing herself. I thought it was a suicide
as well,
because of everything. It had all just gotten too much because, I mean, ultimately for me, what I really liked here was, Raffi clocks Jurati here, that something's suspicious. Jurati does snap here, and Raffi has that nice moment where she goes, the closer we get to finding the synth, the less you want to be there. Started off all wide-eyed about trying to get to and excited about trying to find the synths. And now all of a sudden she's effectively saying, well, does anyone want to go to Nepenthe? Should we not all just go back to Earth? And she snaps at them. And I do like that sort of moment of realization from Jurati. And then she realizes, oh, it could be for the Bruce Maddox thing. So I think her initial suspicion gets overridden and then starts feeding her with the chocolate milk and all the cake. But I think there's then misunderstanding across Jurati, Raffi, and also then Rios, because Rios thinks that Raffi is the one that may have the tracker on. Maybe Rios now thinks that Raffi is the one that's poisoned her or something with or something.
Yeah.
So
I love that this is his old friend. They've been together for years, and he instantly suspects that she's the one that's doing this. So, what does that say something about Rios and his history as well?
Yeah, but I just think, I liked all this kind of activity on La Sirena going on. It made Jurati more real for me.
Yeah.
It not just, she was realizing the consequences that was happening and she was taking a stand. Maybe, elements of the mind meld, that interrogation of her own mind were starting to wear off. So she's done something about it. But I did think it at the start that it was just all too much and she was trying to kill herself.
Absolutely. And there's even that kind of Superman moment, that Christopher Reeve Superman moment where she has that thing of going, why does it have to be me? Why do I have to go after the effing synth and kill her Soji? Why does it have to be me that does that? Can somebody else just do it? Can somebody else take this weight off my shoulders? I say Superman, that's much more Jesus in the desert. I'm sure that predates Superman.
Same guy.
It's pretty much the same guy. But
there's only 12 stories.
but I think that is the moment where she's going, she knows she has more of this mission to complete and doesn't want to do any more of it. That's why I thought she was committing suicide in this episode.
I think Jesus's one was Moses, came from Moses.
I think it might have. Chris, I know you've already talked about Jurati in your previous point. Have you got anything else to say about it there for this point?
No, I was pretty much the same with you guys until I, again, copped. It was.
Oh, yeah, the tracker's gone off. That makes much more sense.
Exactly. As soon as the tracker goes off, I'm like, okay, so then, yeah.
Oh, she'll be grand. She's going to come out of that coma. She's fine. She's a medical doctor. She's just slightly overdosed herself because of that. Have to say, a tracking tablet that you crunch once and can track you forever. That's really dangerous, isn't it? Hopefully nobody will be popping one of those into your mouth while you sleep and just tracking you for the rest of your life.
You could disguise it as a Rene or something, so for the stomach settler or an Alka-Seltzer or something.
Yes, Rene is the French version of Rennies, the stomach settler. Yes.
Okay, it's Rennies. Sorry, Rennies. Yes.
John, what is your medium point for this episode?
Well, my medium point is I was wondering why they had on Nepenthe a rabbit in the sort of establishing sort of panned shot. And my middle point is Kestra, the rabbity Robin Hood of the forest, or the wise Wabbit, if it was Warner Brothers. Because I really liked her. I thought she was going to be the, dare I say it, the annoying kid. And I found her really, really good. I loved that she tried to empathize with Soji. And I think I've put in my notes here, it's not from the pavement she licked it, having come from the loins of, Will Riker and Deanna Troi. So, some of Deanna's, empathetic knowledge and from her own DNA has rubbed off on her, and I really enjoyed that. After that sort of whoops moment where she lets it slip that she is actually an android, Kestra does try to find that empathy with Soji through both her dead brother Thad, but also with Soji's dead sister Darj, and she really tries to connect with Soji here, almost as this little sister, and I thought that was really, really nice. Yeah. But more than that, she looks to build the trust between Soji and Picard as well. Like Soji is really struggling to try and understand what's real, what she's experienced, and whether she can trust everyone on the planet Nepenthe, and in particular Picard. And I think Kestra she just came across as a really very wise lady. She said, you could have Picard, and he could have you, and you could both have each other. Yeah. And I thought that was just really nice, where she's trying to sort of just make Soji trust Picard, and just the way she was doing it in a very childlike way, but one that I felt was really sort of meaningful. Yeah. And I thought this was good. I was not expecting to sort of like this character at all. I just thought it was going to be the annoying kid. Yeah. But they ultimately did a Will Wheaton on her, and
in one episode rather than
in one episode. And I thought she was really good, and you got the sense that she was of the Riker Troi stock. Absolutely. And I thought it was great.
Absolutely. I loved that moment where she says to Soji, well, if you're only 3 years old, you're my little sister, basically. So you have to do everything I say, which I love that little relationship between
a little big sister.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, I know you look older than me, but now that I know you're only 3 years old, now you have to do it. Now you have to do what I say, But yeah, I love that she's trying to build this little family unit out of Picard and Soji. Picard doesn't have anybody really, nobody else with him anyway, nobody else on board the ship, and nobody else that he knows from the past. So if they can just trust each other, they can get through this. And I love that there is that little knowledge of this must have come from her parents. That makes a lot of sense.
And also just through the language of Vivine as well, where Soji learns it, the entire book within 15 minutes or something.
It's 3, I think she says.
Or 3.
Through the 200
yeah, exactly. So I just thought this was a really, bringing Soji into her own imaginary world with this language and her rabbity Robin Hood and everything.
Yeah.
In order to get her out of effectively her imaginary world that she thought was reality for a while. So I just thought this was a really good way of doing it. Yeah. So that's my main medium point.
Yeah. For me, she was the quintessential Will Wheaton.
Yes.
Wheaton.
Will Wheaton.
Cool whip. She was just that. That's what the character was. I'd like to see her back as the Wise Wabbit, the Will Wheaton, with her kind of Cool Whip.
Well, I kind of like the idea that you could send her off to meet up with Picard and Soji at some point in the future. You could have a time jump even. Soji won't age.
Yep.
Picard, you probably could age him up a little bit more than he's playing again on the show for the second
don't know
season,
about
if
that.
that's going to be the final season, because you can't keep aging them every season. but you could have the two of them being sent off, or at least Sergio coming back to visit these characters in future as well. But I think it's a lovely relationship. I think it's really well played and very realistic, I suppose. I love that she even calls out very quickly, after pointing the arrows at the two of them, she goes, I wouldn't kill you really. I'm a pacifist, but this is a game, This is just a costume that I'm dressed in, That's why she had the rabbit ears on top of her Robin Hood costume kind of thing, It's just really cute that she's out playing in the woods, basically. So, but she's playing and also out hunting as well. So,
2 birds, 1 stone, or in this case, 1 rabbit, 1 arrow.
Exactly.
So for me, I'm going to bring in my point here. So I want to discuss Hugh and Elnor. And
Yes.
the battle and failure to save some of the XPs. So we do lose a number. We don't know how many. We lose a fair amount of the XPs.
Yes.
At least 7 get killed by the Shatvash. We don't know how many XPs there are on the cube.
Yeah.
But definitely, it makes a dent here.
I think we're to believe that there's thousands of Borg being reclaimed, because remember, this was an active Borg ship and there's thousands and thousands that were on board. I think this certainly makes a dent because it's punishment for Hugh for not giving the information that Narissa wants, and every dead XP is major punishment for Hugh. I think he plays this moment fantastically as well. It's really painful. The pain that's in his face as they're executing each individual one is quite evident as well.
Yeah. I would say actually probably the biggest punishment is his death a few minutes later. So there's 3 parts to this for me. The first part is Hugh's death. I'm pretty sure that this is going to have a massive knock-on effect in the next episode, because we do know there is some still connection between the XPs. We can see that for when Picard first goes onto the ship and Hugh goes, they're trying to save you from falling off.
Yeah.
And you have those 2 XPs. So there is still some form of connection there.
Yeah. And we know that he knew where the Borg Queen's quarters were, which he wouldn't have known on this particular ship because he wasn't there. All that kind of stuff is all knowledge that he could only gain if there was some form of connection still there with the Borg. Yeah.
So we are going to see some ramifications to these XPs being killed.
Yeah.
The second is the little fight scene we get. Showing off Elnor. Again, like his samurai ninja warrior tricks.
Yeah.
Where I was laughing in my head slightly, which is, okay, they're gonna put, phaser rifles up against a sword. And I was like, oh, this is not gonna go well for him. Well, it does, kinda. he kinda does well against it, and he takes that.
He's Batman.
Yeah, he really, it's parkour.
Yeah, it's parkour Batman with a ninja sword.
Well, I think the whole setup to the scene is you brought a knife to a gunfight, and that's the overconfidence of Narissa, but he's lulling her into that false sense of security. She's got 5 people there with guns trained on him. Well, they can't possibly lose here, can they? But of course they're going to. This is our hero character who knows how to use these skills. They're supposed to be some of the most fearsome warriors in the galaxy, effectively. And he's trained for years at these skills. But this is the first time he's putting them into practice, remember. He's killed 1 person in the past. You presume he wasn't going around the planet that he's from just killing people. This is his first proper mission that he's been on. And he's only killed 1 person just before he accepted the mission. And now, this time, he's killing the Romulans that are on the Borg cube. So, but I think it's fantastic. You're absolutely right. It does feel a little Batman-y as he disappears down one character, appears in front of 2 guys, takes them out, gets another guy.
That was great.
And kills him and is left with Narissa. Now, unfortunately, probably his inexperience, but when someone tells you this is not how I deal with your type of fighting and puts away their weapon, that's your moment to strike. It's not your moment to put away your weapon and fight them fist to fist, especially a Romulan who is of the most secretive and deceptive version of Romulans, because she's got a plan, which is exactly what she enacts here. killing Hugh. My gosh, guys. Like,
yeah, that was...
We did talk on the last couple of episodes about particularly that meeting between Picard and Hugh returning character from Next Generation, who was just fantastic in that moment when he met Picard. Talk about building rapport instantly, I thought, with the audience. He's just fantastic in there. And I just kind of expected that this would be someone else that would be carried on in this series. You know, if you're going to bring back a character only appeared in the show a couple of times and you make sure that he's given this really good role in here, you expect that since there is a season 2, maybe that's a character that could survive into season 2, you know, but
I think it makes it really meaningful. I mean, I was just kind of like, yay, they've both survived. And then, you know, half an hour into it and Narissa is kind of lulling Elnor into a sword fight as she puts away a gun and then just flicks out the ninja daggers and it gets him right in the jugular as well. So like, what an aim from Narissa. But yeah, it was a real shame to see Hugh go, and I wish they hadn't, but at the same time I also do really respect shows that say to some extent that no one's sacred. I think going into the end of the last episode where you knew the Romulans were coming for Elnor and for Hugh, there wasn't anything certain in my mind that they would survive. And then seeing them survive, I was like, oh, that's great. And as I say, within half an hour, half of that couple has gone, in the form of Hugh. And so I will miss Hugh. He's one of my favorite characters.
Had to get in one more time, didn't you, John?
Yeah, I did. But, you know, they've made a move and they've stuck with it. And I have to respect writers and showrunners that do that, because it must be a difficult thing to do. You certainly don't know what potential backlash may be, but it gives it also real emotional punch. You know, that a highly trained agent of this secretive Romulan cabal who said to him only earlier, I would kill you if it wasn't for that asinine treaty that we have with the Federation, kills him. Yeah. She's got what she wants. Was always her aim. And so, you know, it's absolutely consistent. It makes it consistent despite the best efforts of Elnor, which I think what we're seeing here, because I was really pleased that Elnor survived. But what we're seeing here is that Elnor, despite being massively trained, hugely accomplished in his swordcraft, in his Batman skills, is also still learning those skills of the Qowat Milat. He's still quite young, and someone more experienced, possibly in Narissa. I don't know how old she is. She doesn't look that much older than him, but I'm just assuming she is. You know, played him for a bit by telling him, okay, I'll put the gun away, I'll get out my dagger. That's how the Chad Vash fight the Qowat Milat. Yeah. You know? And in doing so, she was able to release the ninja dagger.
Yeah, but also remember, he is massively arrogant in his abilities too, and he needs to learn to temper that too. You know, it's really important. Every time he's gone into battle, every single time, he goes in with a battle cry of please choose to live to the people around him, meaning he believes he's going to win every single fight he's in. So having this moment where there's nothing I think he could have done to stop Narissa other than keeping his sword out and killing her immediately when she puts away her weapon, which is the only option. But by letting her live, she had a plan that he couldn't possibly have anticipated, which was to kill Hugh and then get out of there. So he has to learn that you can't win every single one as well. You know, especially if you're not thinking that other people could be better than you in the room. So I think you're right, John. I think this is a moment of learning for him as well. So
yeah, and I'm interested to see where they go with this. I question whether Hugh is dead, because of the XB Borg parts in him. There is part of me going, does he still have an implant that reanimates? That does he still have little nanobots in him? Blah blah blah. Curious to see that.
Yeah. I think you might be disappointed if you think
Okay.
he's going back. Unfortunately,
Okay.
I did
Then-
see
then
a
he's
lovely video from the actor who plays him, Jonathan Del Arco, just talking about his experience on the show and talking about the fact that he's so proud of what he accomplished with the death of Hugh and this moment, particularly, and the outpouring of support that he's had over the years, I suppose, from Star Trek fans. So yeah,
Nice.
I think that might be
Oh, he's dead then.
his final moment. On the
Okay.
show.
Yeah, he's
So-
gone then.
Damn you, Twitter.
The one bit I will say is again, this is kind of leading back to what I talked about earlier, is the emotional resonance of Elnor closing scene, where he's there and he's scared and alone and curled up. That's not resonating with me.
Right.
I feel characters hasn't been used amazingly well in terms of building that emotional connection, just based on his lack of screen time or use so far. If this had have been in another 2 episodes and we had have been given more and more and more time with him, and maybe if they had have just extended this out by 1 more episode and we had have got a time with him and Hugh together and him learning, being a bit more open, maybe him spending more time with Picard on the ship, just getting more connection, I think it would have been better. It, like, literally, if they had called it out, going, "You're not always going to win. You're a child in a man's body. You are not the greatest warrior." And him pushing forward and going, I will do this. I make sure that they choose to live. Blah blah blah. Right. It just would have hit a bigger note for me. But again, I like what they did. It's just it's not. It connected like 60%. It didn't collect the full 80 to 100. Yeah. So it's a B grade, or maybe it's a C grade. I don't know what 67% is. Anyway, it's a good grade. It's just not a great grade.
B minus.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely this was the best episode for Elnor. This is where he had the most to do, and we started to see. I mean, we know about him through the flashback with him as a young child with Picard, but I think as well, maybe because of the Qowat Milat way, even though they have absolute candor and will say whatever it is that needs to be said in that moment with brutal honesty and candor, it's like Spock, there's a certain detachment there from maybe normal humanity as a Romulan. If Spock had that moment after the first 3 episodes of being on screen in the original Star Trek, it's difficult to know. Whereas by the time, we get to Khan, that relationship between Captain Kirk and Spock on the Enterprise. So, but I do know what you mean. It suddenly felt weird that he was so sort of scared, but I do think that he's been knocked off his pedestal here, and I think that he's realized that all his swagger, his exuberance of youth, when up against a trusty, non-stunning Romulan blaster, and he's on his own, then yes, it's a different proposition, and hence, I suppose, why he does the Fenris SOS for the Fenris Rangers. I am kind of intrigued with Hugh having died. Now, yes, I'm really excited with what you said, Chris, about the collective waking back up again in this Borg cube because of all these XBs and then Hugh having been killed. That maybe this reactivates them in a way that is not going to be particularly beneficial for the Romulans.
Yeah, maybe. I have to say, I don't normally ask much from TV shows that I'm watching and kind of willing to let them tell their story. But if you're on a Borg cube and you're reclaiming Borg and you haven't reclaimed all of them, and you specifically say there are areas of the ship if you go into, you're in extreme danger. If you don't show that danger and you don't show some of those Borg reactivating and attacking somebody, if you don't do that once in the rest of the 3 episodes that you've got, you've completely wasted an opportunity for me. So I'm really hoping that this show just has one moment of a fully formed Borg attacking somebody, even just for one quick moment. That's all I want.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting if they do. But let's definitely wait and see.
Mm-hmm. Let's get on to our final little moments for this episode. Just a final thing that we want to talk about for the episode.
Make it so, number one.
John, what's one thing that you want to talk about?
Well, of course, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers, my small moment is that everyone's dinner table should become the captain's ready room.
Aww.
I love this. Again, it's a bit like Riker in the kitchen at the start. I just thought it was so cool. A really nice way of taking Riker and Troy's home and just giving it that next generation aboard the USS Enterprise feel. I absolutely loved it. And also, I did take some decorating advice from them because I thought all those candles down the middle were cool. And I would quite like to do that on my own dinner table.
On
Slash
our
ready
dinner
to-
table,
On
or-
our dinner table, in fact.
Or
Yes.
just yours?
No,
Do we get
ours.
two
Sorry,
separate dinner
ours,
tables?
yes.
Excellent. That'd be cool. Yeah, it'd be really good. Just make sure you're not passing bread across the table, across the center of the
Well,
table.
then you get
That's a good
toast.
idea.
It's fine.
I've taken some hospitality advice. Every guest gets 2 pieces of pizza and everybody else has to take 1. I like that. That's quite cool. Fatten up your guests. It's quite nice. Chris, what's your little moment from the episode?
Mine is Soji's data head tick.
Oh yes, very
Like,
cool.
just big hats off to Issa Briannis on this. It was it was down to Brett Spiner level.
Yes,
Like
it was perfect.
it was just it was perfectly mimicked.
Yeah.
I saw that and I went, oh. Now they have to get her to do it more because now she's done it once. They have to see it more.
She has done it once before in the season, actually, when Narek was trying to explain something to her and not tip her off that she was an android back in episode 3, I think it was. She did the same kind of head tilt as well.
It wasn't as pronounced, was it? Okay, I did not connect it. This one just straight away made me go, oh, that's Data. Literally, that's Data.
And I love that that's exactly the same thing that tips off Riker as well.
Yeah.
You know, the minute Riker sees it, he goes, now I'm going to help you because now I know what I'm facing here. It's not just any android. That's certainly one connected to our data. I think that's really good. Just to point out, since we are an audio podcast, I just want to point out that when I said that she'd done that before, Chris immediately did his own data head tilt. Since we don't have this filmed, I just thought it was quite funny to point out.
I always do that head tick. That's the, what? That is my individual almost always, huh?
Chris is an android.
Yeah, I like the moment Riker says she has data DNA.
Yes.
That was pretty cool. And also, because I didn't really pull that out, but it's the memory of Data pervades this as well with Riker, Picard, and Deanna. You know, the friend that he was as an android synth. I thought was really nice as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Derek, what's your small moment that you want to discuss?
Just one small thing I wanted to pull out from the beginning of the episode, just because I thought it was a bit odd. When they were trying to escape the tractor beam and Rios was kind of shouting at Raffi to do whatever she needed to do to pull them away from the tractor beam, you see Raffi is looking at some files on her screen, and one of them's the Romulan drawings. Do you remember the ones that when Soji was talking to Ramda, the former Borg who was a Vulcan, in where all the other Romulans were? Those are the drawings that Raffi's looking at. It's almost as if Raffi wasn't trying to help at all. It's like as if she wasn't trying to help escape the Borg cube. She was trying to find out more information from Romulans aboard this Borg cube. So this is what she hit on. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Is there some potential that, is Raffi still investigating possibly this mission that's been preoccupying her for so many years? What did the Romulans have to do with the attack on Mars is the thing that drove her, the wedge within her family? Was she still doing this in this moment of peril when Rios thought she was supposed to be helping them escape? I just thought it was interesting that that's what she was looking at the time. So, just put a little pin in that one and we'll come back to it. Maybe it might be something for a future episode.
Yes.
There are loads of other things to talk about in this episode. Let's see what else we've got left.
Isn't there something else you have to do?
Yes. So, anyone have any other notes or something else?
Lots and lots of stuff in here, lots of references. I think being the episode that it is, they probably assumed that some people would tune in that were just fans of Next Generation to see the reunion of these 3 characters. So lots of interesting touches from the Next Generation. I'm sure you guys noticed the music was played a number of times throughout the episode. The original Star Trek theme and the Next Generation theme were played a few times when we saw Riker and Deanna Troi on screen. So I thought that was a lovely little touch there. Also, the name of their daughter, Kestra, she's named after Deanna Troi's older sister who had drowned when she was young. So a lovely reference back to a one episode storyline where we learned that. But I think we had heard about the character a few times over various series, when we had Deanna's mother, talking about it, the loss and how difficult it was. So, also interesting that Deanna has gone through another loss of her own son as well. The name for Thad was taken from one of Will Riker's ancestors, who was also mentioned in Next Generation. So Thaddeus named after Riker's ancestor, and Kestra named after Deanna's older sister. So nice little touches back to Next Generation.
It's good to see that even in that far in the future, they're still making and calling their kids stupid names. Why can't there just be John? John Riker. There you go.
Oh, poor John.
Well,
No, that's a good name.
a good name.
We want that. That's a good name.
Oh,
Can't there be a
John.
John Riker?
Well, there is an in-universe reason, Chris, because Deanna Troi is a Betazoid. She is from the planet Beta Z. She's from a different planet. You know, Deanna, as a name itself, isn't a usual English Earth name, I suppose you'd say. So,
Sure.
So there is a reason why they might call
And
their
Kestra
child.
is also a girl.
Yeah,
True.
exactly.
You wouldn't call it John.
Joanna, then, if you will.
Yeah, Joanna.
Anyway, moving forward, my one I really liked was the Empire Strikes Back reference by Girardi. It was obviously a clear call out. It was really good.
Yes.
I think she says, let's go hide in a comet somewhere, which turns out to be like a giant worm or Gormanger. We know what happens in Empire Strikes Back. It's the great scene with the Millennium Falcon, and they go into the mouth and then have to jump back out of it as the space worm goes to get them.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's definitely, it's a nice call out. I just think it was a nice bit.
It is, and interestingly, the species that she says, the Gormengander, that massive worm species that was featured in Star Trek Discovery, the episode with Harry Mudd, an excellent episode. Rainn Wilson does such a great job playing Harry Mudd in that episode. But interestingly, that massive space whale, I think they call it, it's what Harry Mudd arrives in. He's sitting inside its mouth as it drops onto the Discovery. Its mouth opens up and Harry Mudd pops out the front of it. So they even are referencing a species of space alien that was created within Discovery just in this one line in this episode. So nice little touches to use those kind of things. But definitely it's an Empire Strikes Back reference as well. Yeah,
Nice.
Few notes from me. I definitely think there is a Mass Effect feel to La Sirena, and indeed the controls that Rios uses to pilot her.
So cool.
I would say almost looks more like Mass Effect than a ship you would expect in Star Trek.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think it's pretty cool. I love the Mass Effect game series, so I'm all for a bit of Mass Effect visuals coming into the Federation.
Oh, there is just that moment where he kind of grabs the light throttle and pushes it forward, and the ship just boosts into warp, and you're just kind of going, oh, I want to hop back in and ply Mass Effect right now.
It is. It's such it really does have that feeling of the Mass Effect game series.
Yeah.
Also the Nepenthe, the planet that Soji and Picard beam to, and the definition of Nepenthe is a drug or a drink, or the plant yielding it, and it's mentioned as having power to bring forgetfulness of sorrow or trouble, which is gives a nice ring to the fact that Riker and Deanna have chosen this to be their home, certainly with the sorrow that they've had with Thaddeus.
Yes, absolutely. And also, making Picard forget and move on from the trouble that he's going through, making Soji forget the sorrow that she has from the trouble she's gone through. So, lots of great ideas in there as well. Picard also calls out in this episode his don't stab him in the heart, because his heart is pure duratanium. That's from Next Generation. It's just a reference to the fact he doesn't have a real heart in there. Sometimes also a reference to why he can be a little bit cold-hearted because it's made of metal. But we know he's warm and loving, really. My final one, just a reference to the book, the Star Trek Picard, Last Best Hope. I've mentioned it a few times in the podcast here. I highly recommend reading it. It just adds adds a little bit of extra color to all the characters that you're seeing within the show here. You know, there's nothing additional that you would need to read the book for that you can't get by watching the episodes of the show. But if you're enjoying the show, it's certainly a really enjoyable read to go along as a companion book. But just something that I thought was interesting that's pulled into the TV show here. Within the book, Jurati is absolutely obsessed with cakes. And it's just quite funny because almost every scene that you see her, she's either going to a coffee shop or having cake at lunchtime or bringing cake to somebody else's house. So I like in here that they have this moment that she references she ate 3 slices of massive cake to get herself over this thing. So it's been taken in here. It also makes me feel that the person who wrote the book at least had access to all 10 of the scripts for the show and was able to take all of the character references and work them into the book in various ways. So all these characters do match up very closely to what's in the book. That doesn't always happen with books that are tie-ins to TV shows or movies. So I just think it was just a touch that I liked.
Definitely nice. Definitely nice. But gentlemen, I think it's about time we move on to some feedback. Yes, fellow fans, you can send in your thoughts to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or join us on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries, where we put up a spoiler post for every episode where we want to hear your thoughts after you watched it and let us know so we can include it in the episode. If you want to hear your voice on the podcast, you can record a clip of yourself on your phone and email it to us. Or you can go to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com and record up to 90 seconds of your thoughts about that week's episode. First up, we have a voicemail from Kevin Smith, not the Kevin Smith, a different Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith from Edmonton, Canada.
Hi guys, this is Kevin from Edmonton, Canada. I love the podcast. I've actually surveyed a few of the Picard podcasts, and yours is my favorite. So thanks for everything you do and keep up the good work. I'm thinking about Picard from the Romulans' point of view. I'm imagining someone like the station manager coming onto his shift. Locutus is requesting access to the Borg cube. Oh, that's concerning. What, no one went down to oversee the arrival of he whose name means speaker for the Borg? That's alarming. What? It was Hugh, the ex-Borg, who received him onto the ship? And they're a Borg addressing him by name? Good Lord. What's that you say? Hugh introduced him to a secret Borg Queen chamber, from where he disappeared with someone who turns out to be a synth? Prepare the defenses. I mean, really, they really don't know anything about what happened or why Picard was here, but if I were them, I'd be fearing the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks for listening to my input. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Kevin. That's really good, actually. Yeah, like I know we kind of mentioned the fact that the idea that they gave Picard directions to get down to the ship, he had to be there on his own. Nobody else could come with him, and then suddenly he's in an area with nobody around him at all, with no armed guard waiting for him on arrival. You know, it takes a couple of minutes for Hugh to get over to see him at the exact coordinates he was told to beam down to. You know, that is pretty interesting. But you can imagine it from the shift manager's point of view going, did we just do that? It was really bad of us.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Kevin, for the feedback there. Yeah, I mean, it was one of those weird things. It was almost like they were trying to put him in danger by putting him into an area that would possibly have these Borg that are still potentially lethal, maybe, or something. And of course, they've miscalculated badly, and certainly given that Hugh came to meet him. So, but otherwise, you're kind of wondering what were they expecting him to do once they had sort of beamed him or given him the coordinates to part of the ship. Someone had to meet them. You would think the controlling Romulans would want to be there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kevin, for the voicemail. And yeah, like it's crazy. Like it's not a plot hole. It's definitely an oversight on many parts. But yeah.
Thanks so much, Kevin, as well, for listening. It's really good that you've been listening to the podcast, and I'm glad you're enjoying it. Yeah.
Yes, and thank you for making us your number one choice when listening to your Star Trek Picard podcasts. Next up, we have an email from Graham Rutter in Buckinghamshire. Hi, guys. I've been a podcast subscriber since The Watchmen, my personal TV highlight of 2019. Thank you very much, Graham. Glad to have you on board. You've got 300 and something episodes to go back on. listen to as well. Good on you. Graham went on to say, a thought on Star Trek Picard. We must assume that the affectionate flashback scenes earlier in the series between Bruce Maddox and Dr. Jurati occurred some time ago. Bruce's hair and beard appeared a little less grey. The Doctor, however, appeared unchanged. This may just be a small continuity issue, but could the Doctor actually be a synth created by Bruce? This may help explain her emotional conflicts at having slain her creator. Bruce also praised Agnes for her contributions in creating Soji and Dash. Could Dr. Jurati be a prototype model? Alison Pill, the actress who plays Dr. Jurati, has formed in playing characters who seem sweet but have a dark side. For example, her role as a school teacher in Snowpiercer, which is Parasite director Bong Joon-ho's earlier film. I may, of course, be completely barking up the wrong galactic tree here. On a separate tack, have you considered covering Hunters showing on Amazon Prime? Looking at your back catalogue, including The Boys, I think that this is a series you would enjoy. If not, it may be just one to watch for fun. Keep up the good work. I'm looking forward to your critique on Penny Dreadful Season 4. Graham in Buckinghamshire.
Excellent, Graham. I'll take the producer's question there, whether we considered covering Hunters before we go into the Star Trek Picard. Was that okay?
Yes, yes.
We did consider covering Hunters, absolutely, yeah. The reason why we're not covering Hunters is because we're covering Picard right now. If it was coming out weekly, we actually probably would have been able to fit it into our schedule, and I'll spoil my thoughts on it. I absolutely loved Hunters. I couldn't get enough of it. I thought it was a fantastically put together show. The only challenge I had with that show was that it kept popping up with the adverts saying based on real events. And I absolutely understand that there are real events at the core of the show. But when you think of it much more as a mashup of Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds and The Boys, it makes a lot more sense. And I think it would draw in a much bigger audience, because it is much more like a comic book movie and much more like a Quentin Tarantino action movie than I think the trailers would lead you to suspect, especially given the involvement of Al Pacino. I think you'd expect it to be a much more serious courtroom drama with a little bit of violence here and there. There are some seriously heavy violent scenes in this show, and there's some really good filmmaking involved, and I really, really enjoyed the show. But we're not going to be covering on the podcast itself. We just couldn't fit it in at the moment with the stuff that we're covering. So that was a choice. If we hadn't chosen to do Picard, we probably would have done Hunters, but it all came out in one day as well. So something that we're trying to avoid if we can at all choose to.
Yeah, thanks, Graham, for the feedback. Glad to have you on board. Yeah, I really like the idea that she is a synth. I just wonder, though, that it seems as though Commodore O and certainly Narissa are very much aware of people who are synths, or maybe it is just Dahj and Soji that they're absolutely certain about. I just have a feeling that they would be going after Jurati as well if she was. But the idea that she could be a form of prototype model is a good one. The thing is, there's loads of good theories that are coming out, so that's another one to add to the list. Yeah. So yeah, good ideas coming through the Graham, for sure. Yeah.
She could be the mommy. We know who the daddy is. We don't know who the mommy is.
That's true. We certainly know that she's evil.
Yes, she's killed people.
Yeah,
she's evil.
Yeah.
She's the hero in her own story. Let's be clear about that. If you want to know more about Agnes Jurati, again, I highly recommend the novel Star Trek Picard: Last Best Hope. Read it. There's a lot about Jurati in that novel, and a lot about the relationship between her and Bruce Maddox in there as well. Not going to spoil anything that might affect your enjoyment of the rest of the series, though. But thanks so much for your feedback, Graham.
Yes, thank you so much, Graham. Over on Facebook, we have some feedback over on the spoiler post. Brian Malosh from the Picard podcast on Talk Through Media said, I'll hold off on spoilers, but this one was amazing. Almost as good as the premiere for me. I will say one thing. Not giving Marina Sirtis the special guest star credit was a travesty. This was one of her best performances.
Yeah, absolutely. Marina Sirtis's return as Deanna Troi in this episode is just magnificent. Totally agree with you there, Brian. Such a great job. I think I've mentioned it quite a lot back in the episode. Just to mention, I'm sure you guys haven't seen this particular episode, but the Ready Room that Will Wheaton's presenting for CBS All Access, he has an interview this week with Brent Spiner and Jonathan Frakes where they talk about coming back for the show effectively. And it's a really, really good one. If you haven't seen any of the episodes so far, watch that one with the interview with the three of them. I think it's just gives you a lot of insight into what it takes to come back after 18 years into these roles, especially if you're only taking a role for one episode. You know, it's kind of a much bigger deal for Patrick Stewart coming back to take on the full season than for Jerry Ryan to come back taking, 3 or 4 episodes. But for someone like Jonathan Frakes to come back and do one episode, it was quite a lot for him to decide to come back. He makes the point that, he directed Patrick Stewart for 2 episodes already, and then he was asked to come back for the episode, and he already had talked to Marina Sirtis, and she'd been on a stage in the West End for a couple of months, and he was like, these 2 people are at the top of their game, and they're asking me to come back and pretend to be this character I haven't been in 20 years. I'm going to look like a fool beside the 2 of them, So it's just quite an interesting insight into what it took, I suppose, to make the show and for these characters to come back. So totally agree with you, Brian. I think she was fantastic. I'd love to see her get some kind of nod for a guest star as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Brian. Also up on Facebook, we have Bob Phillips. He says, enjoyed this episode and have a few thoughts. Firstly, I'd not realized Romulans could do the Vulcan mind meld, but why not? Same species, really. Then there's the really lovely reveal and finish of the ingested GPS plotline. Maybe Jurati is a goodie after all, albeit a murderous one. Lastly, I have thoughts about the Troi child. What age was she meant to be? Acted between 6 and 13 without clarity for me. Writing, not performance. And extra lastly, if you can hold a drawn bow that long, it's going to be pretty weak pull and not very deadly.
Nice.
And extra lastly, don't those wood fire ovens cook pizza in about 2 minutes? Yes, and have a massive carbon footprint, which is dreadful for that day and age. But I think
it could be a synthesized wood fire, and maybe wood grows differently on this planet.
Yes, I think maybe the technicalities of a longbow may not have been at the forefront of the prop designer. But certainly, yes, at least they didn't put a lethal weapon into her hands.
She's playing a game, obviously.
Yeah,
and Picard knows who she is as well. When he arrives, he knows that that's Kestra because he almost instantly says, "Are your parents home?"
Exactly.
Kind of thing. So, yeah.
I thought Kestra plays it really well. I think probably just mature beyond her years. I hadn't really pegged an age on her, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it's one of those strange things, I think, within Star Trek Picard is that, whilst they have almost like an Alexa type thing going on in the kitchen with Commander Riker, and they have their communicators, they're certainly not doing Facebook, and they still are asking their children to draw and to go out and experience the wider world to put themselves at risk, rather than simply sort of Facebooking it or whatever. So it's kind of, it does seem strange. Maybe I don't know. It's weird. A lot of people sort of look at this future and go, well, why aren't they doing this or why aren't they doing that? But it's just a particular kind of future. And I mean, Will Wheaton was always wise beyond his years as well.
Yeah. Who was?
Will Wheaton.
Oh, there you go.
With his cool whip.
I know him.
Thanks, Bob. Definitely.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bob. Really good to hear from you for this week, for your thoughts on the episode. One final piece of voicemail we've got in from our wonderful friend, Steve Brown.
Hello, TV podcast industries. This is Steve, and I just finished watching Nepenthe for the first time, and loved it. It was a good episode. It was great to see Riker and Troi back, and loved seeing their daughter, and such a tragic story about their son and the fact that he could have been cured if this synth ban hadn't happened, which was a little unclear to me. but okay, I'll take it, I guess. If that's, it just doesn't seem, it seems like there would have been another way to find a cure, but maybe not. I don't know. Really love that Eleanor is still alive and almost got, sister, whatever her name is, Nerek's Romulan sister. And, sad that we have lost Hugh, but, I don't want to give anything away, no spoilers if you didn't see the preview for next week, but something's coming that I am just very excited to see. So can't wait to hear what you guys thought. This was a short one, but I really did enjoy the episode. I'm enjoying your guys' podcast, the pub quiz questions. That last one was tough. I don't even know if I got it right or not. I totally had to guess. But the other questions have been great, and hopefully the one for this episode isn't as difficult. All right, talk to you later.
Excellent. I think with the pressing of the Fenris SOS badge, even if we didn't see the preview, we know why you're excited to see the next episode, Steve, because we are too. That's going to be very exciting what's happening in the next episode.
Yes, thanks, Steve. So one thing I will note, just for some of our listeners who are in Europe, who are not watching in the States, on the recordings there on the CBS app or with their streaming service, the trailer for next week plays before the credits. Mm-hmm. So.
We don't tend to do that in Europe, do we? Especially with the streaming services, they don't put the trailer on there because I think you can't really avoid it. And almost every American show I've ever watched when I've been over there, you're suddenly watching a trailer for next week when you may not want to, you know. Yeah, well. Try to keep yourself spoiler free. But yes, really excited to see the next episode. I'm glad you're enjoying the show, Steve. And wonderful setup there. You can tell you're a podcaster, Steve. You've just set up our next section. Time to go off to 10 forward for our pub quiz. Please make the question easier than last week, John.
Steve and other fellow pub quizzes, I certainly will make it easier. I don't even think I know the answer, and I asked the question, and I'm not entirely sure whether I remember the question correctly either. So
I've got the question. I've got the answer written down for you. Don't you worry.
Yes, it may be the answer might be drawn from a hat on that one. But in the words of Picard by a pizza oven, speaking of drinking, I am going to grab a glass of wine for this 10 forward pub quiz. I hope you've got your own favourite tipple as well. So the question for episode 7. What 3 topping ingredients were used by Will Riker on the pizza he made on Nepenthe? There are 3 topping ingredients for your culinary quiz pleasure.
Yes. And since it's a reasonably easy question, we do need the specific names that they're given on the episode, right?
Yes.
Not the Earth equivalents of them.
That is true. And one of them is not said at the time when they say the 3 ingredients. So this is across the episode. So it's easier in terms of the answer,
yes,
but you have to be mindful of where the actual names crop up in the episode.
Yes.
Exactly.
But if you do watch The Ready Room, the aforementioned program presented by Will Wheaton, there's a very big hint in there as to what the answer to this question might be, because they may give you the recipe for the pizza.
As the quizmaster and gatekeeper, then I think the post-show discussions will not be taken into account here.
Yes.
Well, let there be no gatekeepers in nerd communities. I hate them. They're my least favorite types of people.
Okay, Dungeon Master then.
There you
Games
go. I like
Master.
that.
GM, DM.
Games Master.
Yes.
Dungeon Master.
Bartender? Can you not be the bartender?
Yeah. Hunky, sexy bartender.
You're basically Argynan.
But I'll be hunky and I'll be like all sexy, delivering you a scotch on the rocks.
Nice. On that note, John, do you want to give the question one more time?
Absolutely. What 3 topping ingredients were used by Will Riker on the pizza he made on Nepenthe? 3 ingredients, please, fellow pub quizzers. And remember, this is all for a chance for some great Star Trek prizes, which I think we can reveal.
Finally, yes, we should be able to reveal the prizes. We've finally chosen what they are and hopefully should get our hands on them in time for the final episode and for the final quiz.
Yes, so you're in with a chance to win a Picard Beer Steiner, a Federation insignia, as well as the Making of Star Trek Picard book. So they are your 3 prizes.
Yes.
Obviously, in the spirit of a pub quiz, we thought a beer steiner would be rather good.
Absolutely, yeah.
It was a toss-up between that or a
Chateau.
Picard wine glass.
Yes, the Chateau Picard wine glass,
Yes.
but they were stemless, and I'm not a big fan of stemless wine glasses.
That's just a
look
whiskey
bit,
tumbler.
Yeah,
but they just look a bit. I don't know. They look a bit beaker-like for children, you know.
and they
without
look
the
like
wine
they
glass.
could smash much more easily in transit.
Yeah.
So we thought a hardy beer steiner with the Picard family crest, which says to boldly go where no man has gone before, certainly after 10 of these.
I don't think that's exactly what it says on, but you can check that out on StarTrek.com. The shop has them available there if you want to see what they look like. And the Federation insignia is the badge that I got over at the European Star Trek
Yes,
premiere.
that is true.
Yes, so just so you know what that is. Thank you so much once again for joining us. We'll be back next week with Star Trek Picard Episode 8, Broken Pieces, written by Michael Chabon and directed once again by Maya Virvalo. It airs on the 12th of March, and we'll be back just afterwards with our thoughts on the episode. Again, to remind you, if you want more of what we cover, go on over to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries. Support us at any level and you can get access to at least the first season of our discussion of Penny Dreadful, season 1, and all future discussions that we have on Penny Dreadful coming out the next couple of weeks.
Yes, you'll have to give us more than a penny, but it won't be dreadful.
Although the podcast is called The Dreadful Podcast, which I really still like.
I
that
love
name.
it. I absolutely. But it's not like Ron said. It doesn't do what it says on the tin. It is
Yes.
fake advertising. It will be dreadful when I join.
Well, maybe you won't be joining now, Jack.
Thank you so much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Remember to subscribe to the podcast, and if you enjoy what you hear, why not share it with your friends? Because sharing the podcast is sharing the love.
Bye-bye, fellow Trekkers and Trekkies. Keep watching the stars.
Engage.
Yeah, thank you so much, fellow Trekkers and Trekkies. As always, it's a pleasure speaking with you. We will be back next time, but remember, keep watching, keep listening, and engage. I had 5 funky Fonzie Vulcans out of 5.
You didn't get to use it.
No. We might do a pickup.
Or we'll just do it as the post-credit scene. Sorry, John. We kind of ran out of time. We don't normally review episodes, so it's usually the thing that we...
I do it every single episode. Literally.
But
And if you were going to review it, what would you give this episode?
I would give it 5 funky Fonzie Vulcans out of 5.
Nice.
With a Commodore 000 on top for good measure. Yes. What a great episode this was.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Right, there you go. That's our post-credit scene for you, John. Let's not go back in the episode.
There you
No,
go.
excellent. Bye.